These were the events that occurred in the early part of the spring of 2000. Basically, at that time, I was very actively, as they say, getting into my business. That is what I do. And I often took on legal cases that other people refused because they were extremely risky and challenging and difficult. And another case was one. I returned the enterprises to the people from whom they were taken. I was warned for a long time to step away from this case, not to work on it, and not to take the actions that I did. In the end, near the house, I was met by a big, strong man, and he choked me and slammed my head against the asphalt. In the end, there was a fracture at the base of the skull, as was later documented. I defended myself, and in doing so, I injured that person. I called an ambulance for him, and he was taken away in it. I was taken away by the police officers. They held me until morning, interrogated me, and did various other things. And I felt that I was feeling unwell, meaning my head was both bleeding and spinning everywhere. In every report, I indicated that I was requesting to be sent to the doctors to testify because I felt that I had a serious traumatic brain injury. When I was brought to the doctor, it was approximately around roughly 12 hours after the events. They did an ultrasound on me and found. Well, as the doctor said, he said, I really don't understand why this person is sitting here talking to us and why he is even alive. Because he is in a twilight state and his ultrasound results are incompatible with life. That means he needs to be urgently taken to the operating table. Well, and then they performed surgery, removed the hematoma, and, well, overall, the treatment was indeed quite successful, as everyone can see. At that moment, when he was choking me and banging my head against the asphalt, it felt like the lights went out. But not just the lights, the sound went out too, and all tactile sensations were turned off as well. Smell, taste, all feelings. Everything was completely absent. It was a strange, swirling darkness, and somewhere in the distance, just above the horizon line, there was a faint light, and I rushed there. I can't say whether I walked, flew, or something else. So I somehow started moving there. Well, that's it. I somehow see myself, no legs at all, but the arms. A piece of the shoulders, that's how I see myself. And I am moving. And suddenly I realize that I am moving as if on a narrow road, like the paths in small parks and on the sides. In a checkerboard pattern, people start appearing periodically. I guess. That is, I couldn't make out their faces. But as I somehow passed by them, they either just shook their heads or said, no, not mine. So I couldn't understand anything and kept moving forward. And suddenly, there it was ahead. They were all dressed more or less the same, as if in some kind of robes. At some point, there was a woman ahead. If it wasn't clear before, there's a man, there's a woman, and they're in these robes. But here, she was just wearing a dress, not a robe. She stepped forward, blocked my path, and said, "This one is mine." I said, "Hello." But for me, I believe, I think it's not the right time yet. I have a lot of unfinished business there right now. Just less than a month ago, that is, a few weeks before these events, my daughter was born. It turned out that my wife was in one hospital and my daughter was in another. That is, there were premature births. I said, I absolutely can't. I still have so much there. She says, why are you going there then? I say, you don't have to go. If you think you have unfinished business, go back and finish it. I very quickly turned around. In short, I very quickly rushed back. I open my eyes and see that man again, who continues to strangle me and slam my head against the asphalt. I grabbed his face and hit him. He fell off me. after which I jumped up, meaning I took out my phone and called. So he saw that he wasn't moving. Basically, so he called an ambulance and called the police. I have become convinced that what we are accustomed to seeing and hearing is far from the entire world that exists. In other words, it is far from the whole reality that is out there. The first time I had this glimpse of understanding was 5 years before these events. At that moment, I felt that if I was needed in this world for something, then nothing terrible would happen to me. Everything that happens to me is in general. Because that is exactly what is fair from the perspective of the whole world. Tight, tight, tight. Maybe for some butterfly that was born in August, that is, hatched in August. Being late, the sudden arrival of autumn would seem unfair, but for the world, the arrival of the cold will indeed be fair and undoubtedly justified. And in general, the whole world doesn't care about this butterfly at all. It's the same here. Something is happening to me, and this is, in fact, the very justice that exists. So, justice is indeed like goodness. It certainly cannot be subjective. It can only be truly objective. Unlike evil, for example, which can be entirely subjective in nature and interpretation, it was right after these events that I became more entrenched in this, probably, disbelief. Because faith is when we have an understanding of a certain subject, object, or system without the presence of sensory experience. In this case, I had my own sensory experience of what it is, and it transitioned from belief to actual knowledge. That is, I began to gradually accept people and events more and more easily as they are in my life. I stopped thinking about how unfair it is, or how bad or evil he is. Well, I'm not going to get mad at a tree for standing in the spot where I want to walk. What's the point? A tree is a tree, it grows here. Here is a person I met in my life. He is who he is. That means he grows here. That means he lives here, just as he is. There is absolutely no point in being offended by him or angry at him. Birth is an exit, death is an entrance. So it's some kind of transition, just a change from one state of matter to another. It's not death itself that's frightening. It's the fear of leaving things unfinished, not having enough time, not being able to help someone or something like that. That's what it is. What's the difference? Why be afraid of it if it's going to happen anyway? We are not afraid to leave the room because there will just be another corridor. But if we know that we won't be coming back to this room, then it makes sense to tidy up after ourselves, doesn't it? That is, in order not to leave a mess for those who continue to live in this room. In fact, after this experience, I realized that, well, I am not a one-day butterfly. That this is a long journey, and there are certain steps, certain moments, certain goals that need to be achieved. And death can actually come at any moment. That is, this transition can happen at any moment. And therefore, every day should be lived in such a way that it might actually be the last one in this life, in this world, in this environment, and it is necessary to ensure that those who stay continue to live here. After I go out and take a different path, it was more comfortable and more convenient. And accordingly, my goals, I stopped postponing them to tomorrow, to the day after tomorrow. I started to implement them here and now much more, and I learned to see and explore them much more clearly. I believe that we live in at least a four-dimensional space. At the same time, our words are three-dimensional. If at some point in your life you were able to see the world more closely to reality, then what is the point of staying silent about it? On the other hand, running around and trying to convince someone is also pointless. But if you can share, it might help someone that you know, or someone in need. It might help someone understand why they came into this world and why, to reflect on something in general. to understand that his actions indeed leave much more of a trace than it appears from the outside, significantly. That is, indeed, it is possible that the world will become better in the future. I wanted to say it more clearly, but everyone has their own understanding of clarity. Lately, I've been very cautious about these phrases somehow. He's a bright, pure person, as some say. Somehow, maybe we just don't see the part that exists. In general, any object, if it really exists, including a person, casts a shadow. A shadow can be removed in two ways, either remove the light or remove the person. And that's why a shadow always exists. Remember this.